Well, Robert Earl Dean, we have a really great interview with us
Yes, we
today.
do. Yes, we
Who do we
do.
have with us, my brother?
This young man has been on the scene doing some wonderful things in communication, TV, radio. What an author. He does it all. Chaka Khan said, "I'm every woman. He's every man. It's
Uh-huh.
all in him."
All
And
right.
we've been friends for years, as well as you with him. So we all have good relationships, and we love this guy, and we're so excited to have him on the Wake Up Morning Show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one and the only one, Eric J. Chambers. Welcome to the Wake Up Morning Show, my brother.
Good morning.
Good morning to you,
both
Dr.
guys. You
Chambers.
look great.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. We've gone up and down the road together. The BET Gospel Celebration. You were the first person to expose me to that experience, and I'm just excited to be here to talk to you and to glean from the things you're doing and have done.
Well, thank you.
Well, Robert, let's jump into the
Let's
interview.
jump into it.
Yes. So tell me, what is going on in the life of the great Dr. Eric Chambers?
Yes.
Well, what I'm in the process of doing is I had been in school for the last 2 years at Fullerton College here in Orange County, but I've decided to take this semester off and to concentrate on some of my projects, including a documentary that I'm doing on Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. I've already done one on her when I was running my show on the Word Network, and so but I decided to update it, and the goal is to get it on Netflix by the summer, and even on some television networks. So we're going to see what happens with that. So I decided to concentrate now on some of my projects because school. Like last semester, I had a couple of anthropology classes, lecture lab, as well as a writing class, which I loved. I loved all three of them, actually. But this time, but also they were kind of getting in the way of some of the visions that I have. And so as a result, I just decided to, step away and then also do some more public speaking regarding the story of Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. Of course, many people saw the miniseries that was just on ABC called Women of the Movement.
Yes. It was amazing.
And it was quite fascinating watching a movie about someone that you knew personally, and seeing how it unfolded. I thought they did an amazing job with it. There was a couple things here and there that were, I think they just used their creative license just to be able to make it flow better. But for the most part, I thought they did a nice job, and I'm glad because of the fact that they have brought it back to the forefront.
Right. That's history.
And of course, there's going to be another movie coming out in the fall it's called Till, and it is a movie that Whoopi Goldberg has directed.
Wow.
And Keith Beauchamp. Keith is the guy who did a documentary called The Untold Story of Emmett Till, and as a result, he's also the producer of that. And so I'm looking forward to that as well. He had invited me down to the set in Georgia. And by the time I decided to go, they were on the verge of wrapping it up. So, but I talked to him about 3 weeks ago. And so we're excited about that as well. The interesting thing is I'm from Louisiana. Keith is from Louisiana. Both of us attended Southern University in Baton Rouge. And who knew that, we always, talk about who knew two guys from Southern University would be two of the, drum majors for this story over the years. And, and I got introduced to it when I was at San Diego Mesa College back in 1987. And from then up until, now, I was just mesmerized by it, watching it in that class on Eyes on the Prize. And but I've always had a love for, first of all, with my family history, and then a love for our history, especially Black history.
Right.
The history of our people, and so that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on right now.
So let me ask you a question. Congratulations to, I believe, a daughter that is at USC.
Correct.
And so you're in college. What is this degree you're working on? Because you're already Dr. Chambers? What degree are you working on now?
You know, it wasn't so much that I was even going for the grades. In fact, I don't even know what my final grades were. I never even checked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my motive was totally different. It was about the information.
Right.
And my writing class I really loved because it was an essay writing class, and it had been a long time since I had to do essays. And so now when it comes to even debating with people, you know, a lot of it has been stuff, whether it be politically on social media or even in sports, when people make claims, and I asked them, okay, you stated your claim, present your evidence, you know. And so just using some of the stuff that I learned in that class, and it's been a lot of fun. And when you do that with people, that's when they start moonwalking, because they have no evidence, and what they'll do is they'll you know, talk about what they're feeling, or you know, or what have you. But tell them your opinion is one thing, but facts are another.
Yes, sir.
So present the facts, and then we'll go from there. So, and so I went to school. Like I said, my motive was really not even for a degree, because I was majoring in TV film. And even my instructors, initially I started not to tell them what my background was, you know, but I did, at the last minute, I decided to do it. And because I started this process in January 2020, just before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And so, but I still continued up until, you know, this, and I was a full-time student, you know, and so, but I told them, and, you know, even the instructors was like, what are you doing in here? And I said, well, you know, there's still some nuances about the, you know, whether it be editing, producing, writing, what have you, that I can still learn.
Right.
And they would also, you know, glean some of that information from me, because most of them have never worked in the newsroom. Most of them have never, you know, been on red carpets. And I've been, you know, Waiting to Exhale was my first red carpet 26 years ago.
Wow.
And I have lost count of how many I've done. And so, so there was some information, and there were times when students would say, Mr. Chambers, can we talk to you like 15 minutes after class, for 15 minutes after class? And they would ask questions that even the instructor didn't know, you know? And so, so it was fun from that standpoint, you know, and being able to share some of the information and the knowledge that I've acquired over the years.
Right. Now, my question to you is, at what age did you know that this is the field that you wanted to go into?
I was about 5. And I told Yolanda King, Dr. King's daughter, my late friend, when I did an interview with her, I said, it was your dad's assassination that really inspired me to want to do this. Just looking at all the media coverage. We were living in the Desire Projects of New Orleans at the time. And I was just fascinated by all of the media coverage. And as a result, I know I was about 7 years old, and me and my grandfather were sitting. My granddaddy used to love to listen to WSMB radio in New Orleans. And I remember us sitting on the side of his house, watching the train pass by from a distance. And I was like, Granddaddy, one day I'm going to be on the radio. And my granddaddy believed me, you know. And just a few years later, I got my first job at age 13 as a sports writer for the Slido Daily Century News. And I sent you my EPK, my press kit, and there was a picture of me when I was 11 years old, pretending then what I do now. So when people ask, when did you know? I've really never not known. And even when I was like I remember like being about 4 or 5 years old, and my grandmother had me to, she was in the tub. I remember it like vividly, and she had me to restart this Mahalia Jackson album, you know, where you have to, you know, on the record box.
Yes.
And so that was my first introduction into spinning music. And so it's, you know, it got into me, and it, you know, there are a lot of times when people have tried to, you know, convince me to give up the vision. And, but I didn't. And there's a quote in my press kit from Bishop Blake, from Psalm 77:2, which says, my soul refused to be comforted.
Yes.
And so I was working at Southwest Airlines in 2002. And what happened was, after working there, I was still doing radio, but I was out of television at the time. And and my soul just refused to be comforted until I got back to the vision. I loved the job at Southwest, but it was paying airline money, and I had TV bills at the time.
Right.
But nevertheless, my soul refused to be comforted until I got back into the vision. And it was then, that was in 2002. In October, I came up with the idea of the Jasper TV Show that same year. And then I launched it the next year, and it ran 9 years, 137 episodes. And I had everybody from Beyonce, Arsenio Hall, Mark Wahlberg, you name him. I was blessed to have them on my shows.
Right.
And I did most of this with no budget or a little bit of a budget, but just with pure determination. And so that's, and I'm grateful that I stayed the course, because a lot of people give up on their visions, as Iyanla Van Zandt would say, 5 minutes before the miracle.
Wow. Right there.
And then there's also people, family and friends, who would say, when are you going to get when is he going to get a real job? And I'm like, what the hell is a real job? This is a real job. These shows that you see, they don't just create themselves through osmosis and just poof,
Right. Right.
It takes time, it takes effort, it takes talent,
Work.
to get out there and do what I do.
One of the things I think that is important, you're hitting on your journey, and you said that you come from the projects of Louisiana, but your journey is vast. As we began to look at you, you're a veteran.
Yes, military.
You have credits in TV and radio and everything about. So give everybody, can you take us on a quick journey from like they said, from the rooter to the tutor, to where you're at now?
Well, again, it started off in 1976 as I saw this ad in the newspaper on Sunday, the 20th of June, 1976, for a sports writer position. It was a sports correspondent to cover like junior high sports.
Wow.
And I was like, Mom, can I apply for this? And my mother said, okay. We didn't even have a car. And then my oldest sister was like, even if you get it, how are you going to even take your stories to the office, to the newspaper office? And so what happened was I applied, and June 22nd was my grandmother's birthday. And it was on that day I went in, and this 13-year-old kid, and I think that Kevin Cherry, and we're still friends to this day, and I think Kevin was like, if you're bold enough to ask for a job at 13, I'm bold enough to give you one. And he hired me. But I didn't get the junior high beat. I ended up doing Bantam League baseball, Little League baseball.
Wow.
And I got $3 an article. And when I would get paid, I would give my mother the $3. And but it was about seeing my name, my byline in the paper. And that's when I first started using Eric numbers. Because I was inspired by journalists like Irvin R. Levine and Robert R. and Edward R. Murrow.
Yep.
Those guys, they use Howard K. Smith. Those guys back in the day used their middle initial, and I thought that was pretty distinguished. And so ever since then, I have used mine.
Well, I'm going to ask you, because everybody said, what does J stand for? Jehoshaphat? You got to tell them what the J stands for.
For Jesus.
We don't want them to just give you a middle
Jesus.
name.
Well, the J actually stands for Jerome.
Okay.
My family in Louisiana, that's what they call me when I go down there. My nieces, they call me Uncle Rome, but professionally, and then out here, it's Eric.
Right.
And then it was when I was working at Channel 10, one of my photographers there, he was the first one to refer to me as Eric J. And so that's when I just started going by Eric J.
Wow. Now, military brought you to San Diego? Is that how you got here?
That's right. In fact, January 26th made 40 years ago that I left Louisiana, and I left home in Slidell, Louisiana, went to New Orleans. My first flight ever was to the 27th of January, 1982, to Orlando, Florida, and I've been gone ever since. But yeah, it was to Navy. I was a radioman in the Navy, international Morse code operator, and so I did that when I was in the Navy, as well as I my television career actually began in the Navy as a ship sports anchor man.
So you've been
And
doing
so
it.
it
You've been
wasn't
doing it
my
everywhere.
primary job, but I would moonlight doing it because, like I said, I had a top secret security clearance as a radioman, handling classified material,
Mm-hmm.
and and in my off time, I would do I was the ship sports anchor, and I remember after one of my sportscasts, another guy, Mike Sheck, you saw it in the press kit. Mike did the news, I did sports, and the our executive officer, one day we were down in the berthing area, kicking it, watching the show because we were pre-recorded, and he called for Chambers, and I'm like, Chambers, they give me the phone. It's the XO on the phone wanting me, and to my surprise, he was like, good job. I want to see you, more on the air.
Thought you was
And
in
man,
trouble.
that inspired me greatly because when the XO is calling you,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh my goodness, what am I in trouble?
Right.
But that compliment, was very inspiring, even though that wasn't my field in the Navy. Now, had I been a journalist in the Navy, I might still be in the Navy,
Right.
because that was, this is what I do. This is, I'm blessed that my career is also my hobby,
Right.
but because I wasn't, and then I started working at KGTV in San Diego when I was still in the Navy. I went there on my lunch break one day in uniform, to inquire about a job. And the guy told me to come back when I'm closer to getting out. And I did. Next thing you know, they hired me in February of 86. And I got out of the Navy in March of 86.
Your life is so inspirational to me because you knew as a young person what you wanted to do, and you went for it. It was the same thing with me at looking at my baby book. It said, "What did you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "A professional gospel singer and a preacher." The preacher is the one I don't want to be, but the
Okay.
singer is. But listening to you, you were very focused. You were very driven. That is important for the younger generation that are listening now, because it wasn't a quick fix. You went from one thing to another thing to another thing, but it was still what you wanted to do and what you believed in your heart. That's very important. Let's talk about people following their dreams against all odds.
Well, when I was a kid and I would walk around with my little makeshift microphone, I would interview the cats, the dogs, and if they were not available, I'd interview the tree leads.
Wow.
I was always practicing my diction,
Mm-hmm.
practicing my interviewing skills.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when I would even hear some family members tell my mother she needs to take me to the psychiatrist. Something wrong with that boy over there talking to himself. They didn't understand that, I had this call on my life and I was practicing then,
Jeez.
and so, and like I said, my entire college career, high school, college, everything. I was a C student. If I was in school now, they would probably say I have ADHD, The reason why is because I couldn't concentrate I had like tunnel vision. I couldn't concentrate on anything except coming here to do what I do.
Right.
That all I could think about, man, I would sit in class and just gaze out the window saying one day I'm going to be on television or, doing reports in Hollywood.
Yes.
And, my ticket to here was the Navy to Southern Cal. And then, when I ended up coming up here to work at CBS in 1995,
Mm-hmm.
I remember sending my former wife, Veretta, and I, when I worked at Channel 10, of course, she knew that I wanted to be a reporter there.
Mm-hmm.
And it never happened. And for 7.5 years, I applied for the same minority reporter trainee position. And you guys know Lisa Lake, right?
Yes, yes.
But Lisa was my assistant. She was my assistant when I was the chief editor. Lisa was my intern, and then she became my assistant.
Wow.
And then she applied for the minority trainee position that I had been applying for 7.5 years. And the last year, I sent an email to the news director, and I said, Paul, when am I going to get my chance? And his reply was, Eric, haven't we been down this road before?
Wow.
And that was the beginning of the end. I could still be at Channel 10 right now since 1986.
Wow.
But what I did is I took a $10,000 pay cut to go from TV to radio to become news director at KIFM, you know, and because I just, you know, people didn't understand. Even a lot of my colleagues at Channel 10 could not understand, man. And I was only making $30,000 a year at Channel 10, and I took a $10,000 pay cut to go make $20,000 a year.
Wow.
You know, because I just felt sometimes, just like when you're in a parking stall, you have to go back before you can go forward.
Yes.
And after doing that for 2 years, and I be news director, and I also hosted a show called Issues and Answers, and I got the itch to get back in the television. And so in July of '95, I called CBS, NBC, and ABC here in LA to see if I can just come up for a tour. To this day, NBC and CBS, ABC never called back, but the guy at CBS did. And he said, I tell you what, why don't you come on up tomorrow? I had an 11 o'clock appointment just to come up, look around. And because the traffic was bad, I got there at 11:10. And by 12 noon, I was making $32.50 an hour. And my first, on the tour, I ended up editing 21 stories.
Wow.
And I did it. I didn't think I was going to get paid. I did it just to prove that I can do the work.
Yes.
And I just said, you know, if you can give me a CBS T-shirt, I'm good. And he did. And then he called me the next day because he was so impressed. He said, you know what? By rule, we have to pay you, you know, because it's union, IBEW. And I was like, okay. And then he said, you know, hang in there. He said, I'm going to see if I can fit you in somewhere. And he did. That was July 11th, 1995. August 1st, less than a month later, I packed up my truck there. I was living in a studio in North Park on University Avenue. Packed up my, in fact, Preacher Man came over and helped me pack up the truck. And I moved to LA not knowing if I was going to be on the schedule the next day.
Faith.
Just by faith. And even the guy who hired me, he was like, man, I admire you. You didn't even know if you were going to be on the schedule for the next week, let alone the next month. And I ended up being there for 6 years.
So let's talk about the industry and how many times we find ourselves, men of color, being kind of blocked out of things that we are qualified to do. How has that experience affected you in the industry?
Oh, man, it's been devastating, you know, because, look, when I left CBS in '01, to this day, I've applied for over 1,000 jobs, 9 Emmys, Golden Mics, CBS, NFL Network, DirecTV, Big Brother, NBC. It means nothing.
Wow, that's a shame. That's a shame.
And the closest I came to a job was about 3 years ago in 2018, 4 years ago. I was at Spectrum here in LA. I applied for this job as an editor, editing news for their, you know, their morning show, a job that I can do in my sleep. I did it since 1986.
Right.
After I did the interview, I interviewed with about 5 people, and I just knew, man, that they were going to offer me. I mean, the interview was fabulous, you know, especially the last one where I interviewed with the executive producer, and then 2 other people. And I'm just knowing they're about to, it's fait accompli, done deal, about to get offered the job.
Right.
Becomes a waiting game. And there's a sister who was working in HR, and she called me off the record, and she said, Eric, they wouldn't hire you because they were intimidated by your credentials. So I've dealt with that, you know, like I said, since 2001. The only job that I was offered since '01 was CNN in Atlanta. You know, they wanted me, you know, they flew me down there 3 minutes into the interview. They said, okay, it's your job. And so the next 2 hours after the interview, I'm at CNN headline news, and at the main CNN, I'm upstairs and downstairs just visiting, touring, and running into some of my former coworkers who worked at CBS with me. That's the only job that I've had offered since 2001, and that was in November 2001. But I didn't take it because my vision was to come to Hollywood to do what I do, not to move to Atlanta. I'm from the South. I wanted no parts of the South. You know, Atlanta's cool. It's a nice place to visit, but I don't want to live in Atlanta. You know, and And then my wife at the time, she thought I should have taken it. We had this conversation last. Probably should have taken that job at no, because look, the money that they were offering me at CNN was actually what I just found out last week was less than the money that she was already making here.
See,
And so it just not even if and I thought it was like lateral the same thing, but it was about $5, $6, $7,000 less than what she was making. I just didn't feel right having her to give up her career, and we moved all the way across country for a lateral move. Now, if they're paying me twice the money, and the money was about $60,000, something like that, and as a writer, and I was like, I just didn't feel right. We had just bought a house a year and a half earlier. She was 5 months pregnant with our daughter. And for me to move all the way across country for a job that in a city that I didn't want to be in, it just didn't make sense. So, and then on top of that, one of the main reasons is because I knew I wasn't going back home to Louisiana. And I wanted my daughter to grow up around at least one side of her family as far as the grandparents are concerned. And so that's why I decided not to take the job. And that's when I just said, by faith, something is going to happen. And I'm going to tell you right now, one of the best things that CBS ever did for me was let me go. Because once they let me go, that's when I broke every chain. That's when they really came off, and I was able to, like you see all these people behind me up here, Shaq, Destiny's Child, Taraji P. Henson, Yolanda Adams, Eddie Murphy, Morgan Freeman. All of that stuff was done under my own banner.
see,
It wasn't done under CBS's banner. And that's when I, and I started at the Word Network, and I just, once I started there, my first, when I started my Jasper program on the Word Network, it was supposed to be a music video show. The very first episode, I had a spin of about 5 or 6 music videos in it, and I'm the host. The very next episode was the Essence Awards. And from that day to this day, I've never had to worry about another celebrity interview. Initially, I was like, man, I know people, like a friend of mine was the publicist for CeCe Winans, and I knew so-and-so was a publicist for this person, and I wonder how I'm going to get those people. And man, once I did the Essence thing, I interviewed Jill Scott, the Gap Band, Judge Maybelline, Beyonce was there again. And from that, in fact, Rick James, Tina Marie, all these people, I didn't even use all of the interviews. I still have them. I have over 3,000 celebrity interviews.
wow,
Many of which I never even used. And because my show was only 28 minutes and 30 seconds, and you could only put so many in there and still have additional content where it's more than just talking heads.
right.
But from that day to this day, I never worried about a celebrity interview again. And I'm going to tell you, it surprises people, but one of my all-time favorite celebrity interviews was Suge Knight. I sat for about 45 minutes with Suge at the Beverly Hills Hotel in November 2014. And we laughed, we joked, we fist bumped. It was amazing. And so, doing what I get, I just go out and I just be myself. And I have a tendency to be able to bring out the best in people. Just talking to them, just not as a celebrity, but just as a person.
Wow.
One of the things I think that people are chiming in saying they would love to see some of these interviews that have been in your archives. Eric, your dossier is tremendously
It is
large.
tremendous.
You have blessed people. You have launched careers.
Yes.
You have brought people back from the brink of being unknown. You have been consistent in your efforts, and we applaud you for that. I would ask this question: if you were to write your final chapter in your life story, what would that final chapter include?
Well, prayerfully, I got a lot more chapters to come. I just made 59 last month in December, and it's just getting good. And look, fellas, before the pandemic, man, it was a struggle of magnanimous proportions.
Yes.
I mean, I'm talking about from the financial standpoint, even with all of the pomp and circumstance and the interviews with celebrities, this and that, doing the radio program. But it was, when people refuse to hire you, even with your skills, like I don't know if you guys saw the guy Brian Flores, the NFL coach who filed a suit yesterday
yes.
against the NFL.
Yes.
I can identify with that.
Yes.
Eric Bieniemy,
Yes.
one of the best offensive coordinators in the NFL. I've known Eric personally since '93 when he was a rookie with the Chargers, and I was a rookie at 98.1.
Yeah.
The guy, 4 years in a row, you have had a top 5 offense, but you can't even get a sniff as a head coach.
Wow.
I can identify with that.
Injustice.
And so the final chapter in the last few chapters would be me continuing to develop. Look, my book, Dining with the Ancestors. Once I finish this documentary, I'm going to start writing a script based on that. I've got interest in that already to turn it into a movie and or a television series.
Right.
The Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, that documentary. So I'm going to, all I needed all along was just, down south, I don't know if you guys have seen these old pumps where you have to pour water in it.
Mm-hmm.
We call it priming the pump.
Right.
Yeah.
All I needed was the pump prime.
Right.
The pump has been primed, and it happened in the middle of the pandemic. And
Because
so now,
God, because
you
God,
know-
God was before you. Eric, a lot of times, I think God didn't allow you to get those jobs for a reason. Because when
absolutely.
everything's going to give him the glory. When people do stuff for us in this industry, they always want to act like they made you, from the music to the TV to the radio, but they won't get no glory for everything that's happening for you. It won't.
You're
happen.
right. You're right. And as I told my daughter, I said, Erica, it was a struggle, but it was a beautiful struggle.
Yes.
Because when people ask, when am I going to get a real job? I said, for the last 19 and a half years, I've had the realest job ever, being my daughter's daddy.
Come on.
Yeah.
I volunteered for 10 years at her school. Even after she left the 6th grade, I was still a volunteer in the 6th grade, and my daughter was going to the 11th. I loved it. And so, the struggles we had, and we were talking about this recently about how, when my daughter, we used to have to go to Sam's Club for the samples. That was dinner sometimes for us.
Jesus.
When they give out those little samples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it. And so, but if anything, I would just inspire the people that, when you have a vision, write it and make it plain and run with it, just like the scripture tells you.
Yes.
Because you're going to find all kinds of people who are going to try to talk you out of your visions and dreams. You know how many times, man, people have tried to talk me into multi-level marketing? And I'm like, wait a minute. I am next person in line here at the vice president's office at this network. So you're telling me to get out of this line that I've been in for 40 years and go get in that line that's wrapped around the building, wrapped around the block, and start all over again? And so, for me, I've stayed the course, and really, Leonard, getting back to your question, it's still developing.
Yeah.
It's still developing. So I don't know what the, prayerfully, I've got quite a few more years here, especially healthy. And, one thing that would really be a feather in my cap would be to get some of my products on the Netflix of the world.
Right.
And then like my TV show came this close to getting on Fox national television this last month in December.
Well, one of the things that I would say if I was to see what I see in your future, number one, that you would go back to Louisiana and they would give you the keys to the city. Number two, I could see you as a grandfather some years down the road where you're reading the book that you wrote with you and your daughter to your grandchildren, and they were like, that's mommy, and you begin to share with them just the many things that you have done. I love that, I love, the love I have for you. I see you continuing to launch careers, but also I see you as a captain in the industry where it is going to be fully your network.
Yes.
And you're going to be launching new careers. So many times when doors are shut for you, that's because the Lord is giving you to say that you are not to be on someone else's network, but you're supposed to be the network.
Yes.
And so we look forward to those next things. We look forward to those next
I see
projects.
millionaire.
And I see also how you have been mentoring so many people in the industry, and you have kept good relationships with so many
Yes.
people, whereas there are sometimes that even you and our program director on the telephone, and I laugh because it's not like you're just calling to say, I need this or I need that. You literally have great friendships with tons of people all over the world. So I really believe that your season is now.
I believe it
and
too.
that the overflow is at hand. And so when I say, what's your last chapter? It's going to be magnificent, my brother. And we see it.
Well, I believe that one of the things, like right now, you guys, I really, life is grand for me. And the reason it is I'm very careful about what I consume when it comes to television, conversations, all of that stuff. I live in a drama-free zone right now, and I'm just trying to concentrate on things that will edify God and just continue to live this vision that He has, placed inside of me. There's a quote that I love by John Mason, the author of An Enemy Called Average. He says, there are people whose lives are waiting to be affected by what God has placed in you.
Come on.
Again, there are people whose lives that are waiting to be affected by what God has placed in you. You don't know them, they don't know you, but they're waiting for you to do what it is that God has appointed you to do, whether it be sing, whether it be write, whether it be create a new invention to make life more, easier for people. Just like with my Jasper radio show. I've been doing it for 28 years this coming summer. And I've had the pleasure of playing, and like last summer, Fred Hammond allowed me to do the world premiere, one of his songs. Howard Hewitt, there's a song with he and Anita Baker called When Will It Be that came out in 1990, and I just discovered it last summer.
Wow.
And I've fallen in love with the song.
Yes.
And I have Howard and Fred, those guys tune into the program on a regular basis, and they appreciate, like people ask, Eric, how do you become friends with these people? I said, if you ever learn to serve, you're going to stand out. Because what happened is I asked, how can I be of service to you?
Yes.
And when you do it, you don't do it looking for a receipt saying, okay, Robert Earl Dean, I did this for you now.
Right.
When my event comes up, I'm expecting the same reciprocity.
Right.
No, you might as well stay at home if that's what the case is.
Right.
And so, that's the way that I operate. And, and so it's life is just, it's interesting in the fact that all of those people, as you mentioned, LT, all those doors that were closed, man, I thank God they were closed. Because had some of them been open, I would have missed all those award presentations for my daughter.
Right.
Had those doors been open, I would have missed out on doing what I truly love. Like I said, interviewing celebrities. Like the Super Bowl is coming up, and there's going to be buku events here.
Yes.
I'm going to be very judicious about which ones I cover, especially with this COVID thing. Right. But nevertheless, I'll get in the mix with it to some degree. But it's nothing like living your own vision. And I remember, like, when I left the Word Network, it was one of the proudest moments ever. After I left the Word Network, I created the Chambers Urban Network in November 2011. I left the Word Network in March 2012, about 3-4 months later. And my first event I went to under the Cut banner. On the red carpet, they put your name of your organization down on the red carpet so you know where you're going to be. And the young publicist, she was like, excuse me, are you with the Cut? And I said, ma'am, I am the Cut.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And so that was a beautiful thing. And so I wasn't there under the Word Network. I wasn't there under ABC, CBS, none of that.
Right.
It was under the Chambers Urban Television Network. And that was a beautiful thing. And I'm still developing it. And that's what I'm developing a lot of my other programs under, because of the fact that, like last year for my Christmas episode in 2020, I submitted it for an Emmy Award here in LA. We didn't get it, and I'm going to submit the one just last year that was even better, that just aired in 2021. But it's not so much that I want the Emmy as much as I want to be able to achieve this on my own.
On your own, yes.
You know, because I've got the 9 Emmys and Golden Mics. They're in the closet. I've never displayed them. And I won my first one in 1992. They're still in their styrofoam casing. I've never, to this day, displayed them. I think I've taken them out maybe 4 or 5 times in all these years. You know, but that would be a feather in my cap. That is would be a challenge to be able to do it under my own auspices. That this is something that that I was able to create, and I was able to see it through.
Yes.
And as I was telling you about that situation of, haven't we been down this road before? I'm glad, I'm so grateful that Paul said no.
Yes.
See, had he said yes, I would have probably been a local reporter and all that stuff. But as I tell the people, Paul said no local, but God said yes global. So instead of me doing the cat caught in a tree in Chula Vista, I'm all over Hollywood and other places, and including covering Barack Obama running for president when he was a senator.
Right.
I wouldn't have gotten that assignment at Channel 10.
No.
You know, and so that's the kind of stuff that that I'm inspired by, is that I was able to forge my own path. It's not easy. You know, it takes persistence.
Yes.
Because you see a lot of people who want to go, and they want to go to the exciting red carpet stuff. But would you go with me to this event where there is no celebrities going to be there?
Wow.
And even with my book, Dining with the Ancestors, I did really well with the book as a publisher. And there were times for 2 years in a row, I might have missed 6 Sundays without, going out, because I was out campaigning with my book on Sundays like a politician. And I would show up at churches like a stray cat, and there have been times, at least 2, if not 3 times, I went to 5 different churches until they said yes. So say, for instance, like I would go to Riverside. I'd say, okay, this church has a service at 7:30. This one has one at 8. They have one at 8:30. They have one at 9. They have one at 10. And I would just start at the earliest first, and I would go there and say, Pastor Thompson, I'm Eric J. Chambers. Here's my book. Is there a chance that I could, just share the book with the audience? And he may say no. He may say, come back at another time. We got something else planned. I go to Pastor Dean at the next church. And that's how I did it. And like I said, there have been times, man, when it was 5 churches I would map it out regionally. Sometimes I would be able to get advance thing. I would call people in advance, but sometimes I found out showing up was easier than calling in advance. And when I showed up, I showed them the book, and the first thing, I said, I have an elevator pitch. All I need is 1 minute.
Yeah.
And I would get up, and I was like, how many of you know the story of Emmett Till? People like raise their hand. I say, well, his mother, Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, was my surrogate grandmother. Here's a picture of us at dinner. This inspired the book. If you could dine with anyone from history, who would it be? What would the conversation consist of? I've got Tyler Perry, Kendrick Lamar, Taraji P. Henson, Gladys Knight. They're all in the book.
Wow. And
it's yours. And next thing you know, I'm on Sirius XM satellite with Karen Hunter. I'm on Roland Martin show on TV One. And I was, like I say, man, I was just campaigning on behalf of our history.
Yes.
It wasn't just me trying to make a living, but it was also me teaching people.
Yes.
And then when I run into people like Loretta Devine and some of the celebs, and they tell me, your book is on my coffee table, man, it's a rewarding, feeling.
Yes.
Knowing that, that people appreciate the work. So, again, it's not for the faint of heart. You got some people who are accustomed to people just telling them what to do, and they do it. And but when it comes to this kind of stuff, you got to know how to be a leader. You got to know how to be what I call a human engineer, where you have to create relationships with people. Now, some of these pastors remembered seeing my show on the Word Network, and they were honored that I was there. And then another one of my top opportunity, the one of the best ways that I got in is I mentioned my pastor, Bishop George Dallas McKinney Jr., especially at a Kojic church. I never got turned down at a Kojic church.
No, 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 no.
I would say Bishop McKinney is you may go there and say, I love the Lord. That's cool.
Yes.
But when you say Bishop McKinney,
Come on.
and I told Bishop, I said, Bishop, your name is like having the Black American Express card.
Yes,
You
yes,
know?
yes, yes,
Everybody accepted it.
yes.
And so, and there's like, oh, why didn't you say something? Oh, we love Bishop.
Right.
And so that was my key to getting in a lot of churches, is just saying my pastor's name, and he's in the book.
Yes. I just want to thank you personally as my friend. This is an honor for us to interview you. And I'm sitting here and my mind is going back to so many conversations that you and I have, because you and I talk, we communicate outside of business, just as friends and brothers. And I want to appreciate you. You've inspired me. I'm doing this from gleaming from you. Yes, I went to school for mass communications at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, but it was also friendships and watching you and talking to you and seeing you push through and seeing you hustle in a good way. And so I just wanted to thank you, and I want you to know that I admire you. You are dear to me, and I'm here any way that I can help you, because God has put me in a position here where I can be a blessing to you, because you always give to people, and a lot of people don't reciprocate.
Well, somebody, in fact, it was Preacher Man one time, we were having a conversation, and he said, Eric, do you ever worry about the competition? Talking about in radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, man, I never worry about the competition. I let the competition worry about me.
Come on.
I stay in my lane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God has appointed Eric J. Chambers to do what I do.
Yeah.
When I see you guys, I'm proud of what you guys are doing. You know, I remember when you guys first started your program, and someone, I forgot who it was, but they asked, did you hear that Leonard is starting a radio program? I was like, praise Jehovah.
Right.
I'm happy for them.
Right.
There's plenty of room at the cross.
Yes.
I don't want it all.
Yes.
You know, I don't live in San Diego anymore. My show is still based there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have my finger on the pulse of everything that's happening there. Somebody needs to do that.
That's right.
You know, I did my part back in the day when nobody else had gospel on the radio, on the air. And another reason I the job at CNN, I almost forgot that one of the main reasons I didn't take the job is because I didn't want to give up my Jasper radio show.
Wow.
Because I was like, and I was getting chicken feed for doing the show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, if I leave, you know, this is long before the internet. This is long before being able to do shows, you know, remotely and all that
Right.
stuff. And I was like, if I leave, what about those people who depend on this every Sunday morning?
Every Sunday morning.
Who's going to be there for them? Because my radio program was the only ministry a lot of people got.
You're right.
And then Howard Hewitt told me, because I play Howard so much still to this day, he said, according to SoundScan, his #1 market for sales is San Diego.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge.
That's what Howard told me.
Amen. Amen. Well,
And so you know, I just, you know, sometimes you have to think about not just you,
Yes.
but what who your decisions are going to affect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I could have bounced and went to Atlanta and all that stuff, but I also thought about, what about the people who tune into the program and they're blessed by it and they're shut in and they don't go to church,
Mm-hmm.
and the only ministry they get is that 1 hour that I was on the air.
Right.
And as Bishop McKinney used to tell me, the Lord is going to honor your faithfulness, and that he has done.
Yes, he has.
Well, Dr. Chambers, we want to thank you so much for this great interview. We'll say to be continued, because we know there's going to be much more from you, and the story is not finished and it's not over yet. Want to give you the final word. Any final things that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, I would like for people to go to my website. I got a virtual Black History website called TubmanTillMuseum.org. It's a Black History virtual museum. Tubman, as in Harriet Tubman, Till, T-I-L-L, museum.org. And I want them to check that out, as you'll see more information about me and Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley. And, you know, she was a hero. It's just like Harriet Tubman. And so the plan is to eventually, within the next couple of years, turn that into an actual museum,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I want to have a place where I can, all of this information and all of these videos and still pics and and media that I have from her visit in San Diego,
Yes.
I have to house that somewhere. Something happens to me, what happens to that?
I
And so
agree.
that's what I want to do with that. And of course, Robert Earl Dean, I sent you a picture of you and Mrs.
Oh Lord,
Mobley,
it was one of the
and
best pictures
that
ever.
was just an awesome evening. And even that, just sharing her with the people of San Diego,
Yep.
that was a thrill for me and for the people who, like Dr. Shirley Weber and Starla Lewis and various others who came to the event that night, for them to get a chance to meet her
Yes.
at my expense
Yes.
was, financially, I took a tremendous hit. But as I tell people, bringing her and Yolanda Adams in concert
Yes.
to San Diego
Yep.
were two of them. I took financial hits on both, but they were two of the best investments I've ever made.
Yes.
So I didn't have, it was me as a one-man band, and I had a team of volunteers, but we pulled it off. And so that's another thing. So when people, I tell them, invest in other people's visions, invest in other people's stories.
Yes.
It'll come back to you.
Yes, sir.
And finally, understand this: the place you sow may not be where the harvest grows. I may sow with Leonard, but the harvest comes up with Robert Earl Dean because he saw me at this event, and now he has booked me to come and do other things.
Come on. Come
So
on.
that's why I explain to people, go support the people when they're having events. I like to go and support. There are times when I will, share information and stories on my radio program, and then even last week, last Sunday, I did a segment about suicide, after Regina King's son died.
Yes.
And then a guy named Peter Robbins, he was the voice of Charlie Brown. He committed suicide that same week.
Jesus.
And then just shortly after I go off the air, I hear about the young lady who was Miss USA jumping to her death.
Jesus.
You just never know what people are going through.
Yes.
And, and as I also implored the people, reach out to people who are single. I'm a single man. And I even talked about how chronically lonely my life is. People think when they see all the celebrities and all this stuff, how exciting it must be. I live a very lonely life. I'm on my own island. I don't have family here aside from my daughter.
Right.
I have to get on a plane to go see my family in Louisiana. And then also there are times when you call people and they may or may not call you back. It depends on what you're offering. And so that's why I implore the people. I said, call people from time to time just to say hi. Not because you need anything. Because imagine if someone had called that young lady
Just imagine.
and said, you're important. Or, girl, I'm just calling just to say hi. You were on my mind just before she was about to jump. You just never know. And so everybody is dealing with something.
That's powerful.
And so, but again, especially people who are living in solitude, it has its benefits, but at the same time, sometimes the silence, as Seal in his song called Killer, the silence is a killer, he said sometimes. So those who have a wife and family, and a house full of people, you're blessed in the fact that you have all the chatter going on. And but those of us who live alone, it can be very trying. And so what I do is I submerge myself in my work. But even with that, fellas, I still have to get out and go to a restaurant at least 2 times a week just to hear people's laughter.
Wow.
I did that 2 Sundays ago. I did that. Went to El Torito's here, and I was just watching the NFL stuff, and I was just like overwhelmed with this loneliness. And I went out, and they were this young lady. They were having a surprise birthday party for a young sister, about 27, and there's about a dozen people there. And I sat there and I watched, and it made my evening. And then I
Wow.
went over and I said hi, and she said what her name was, and I just dropped a $20 bill in front of her. I said, this to help toward paying for your meal. And she almost cried. And I gave her like a postcard. I said, here, tune into my show. I gave him like some postcards, and I just walked off. I didn't wait for a receipt.
Right.
And but I did that for me because I just needed to be around people. I just needed to hear laughter.
Wow.
And I was there and I heard that laughter. So like I said, in the case with that young lady, and even with celebrities, there's a lot of celebrities on the red carpet that when you're there with them, that is their sanctuary, really.
Yep.
Because once they leave all of the lights and the hoopla,
Yep.
they return home to their lonely lives
Lonely
too, a
lives.
lot of them.
Sad.
So you just never know. And so that's another thing where I thank God for, like people are texting me saying, thank you for your transparency. I say, well, again, everybody's dealing with something, and the loneliness thing, I've had to deal with that for 15 plus years, and it could get overwhelming at times. And God rest the soul of that dear sister, Chesley, and but prayerfully other people who may be going through something like that, that they will connect with others, and again, others will connect with them just to say hi, to invite them to something, what have you.
Well, you have given us some great nuggets and some great insight. We want to thank you so much, Dr. Chambers, for Dr. Eric J. Chambers, for this great interview. We're going to stay tuned because I know that God is going to continue to bring us together working on projects. But, I will just say that we know the best is yet to come.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to a wonderful interview with Dr. Eric J. Chambers right here on GOD Radio 1.
.com.
Y'all be blessed.